What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Golic Jr. That is me. With me, as always, super producer Brandon Newman and my father, Mike Golic Sr., who literally almost missed the beginning of the show because he was dialed into early morning U.S. Open coverage. Good Lord, Dad, get it together.
So I'm watching that, and I'm like, why isn't it on yet? And I forgot it's out in your neck of the woods, which I know you'll be at later. So the 6:45 was the first tee off time, which is 9:45 out here, 15 minutes before we start this show. And I found it on Peacock, and I was watching the first group, and all of a sudden your mother was like, "Isn't your show starting pretty soon?" And I was like, "Oh God, yeah, it is." I almost missed the beginning of this, but I'm wondering, and let me ask you. So I'm watching the first group hit, and the first group are basically young guys, first appearances. One guy was on the Corn Ferry Tour. It was his first appearance. Another guy is a junior at UCLA, his first appearance in the U.S. Open. Now, granted, they're not hitting in front of a lot of people just yet, but it's their first U.S. Open. And so I'm saying take a weekend hacker, and I'm not talking about your country club champs, who probably all think they can go out, and compete in this. Take someone who's a double-digit handicap, 10 or over. Like my index is like a 13, and go on the first tee of the U.S. Open, and you're going to play it for real. What are the odds? Forget the round, because the round we would get destroyed. I'm just talking about the first tee shot of you going to the U.S. Open with an over a 10 handicap, and you're a weekend hacker. Would you, how many if you had 10 people hit, how many would actually hit the fairway?
I feel like there's a couple that might muster it up just out of sheer dumb luck because so much of our golf swing is out of our control anyway. Like what you described is absolutely me as a golfer. And more often than not, I can get the ball up in the air. I can get it close to out and play, but it's hardly ever going to go where I want. So I feel like maybe you get 2 or 3 out of 10 that would do that. But just the sheer nerves of the moment. I mean, hell, I can remember like the first snaps that I took in NFL training camp trying to make a team in a sport that I actually had played and worked my whole life in. And I was nervous as hell and I had a ton of adrenaline going. So a sport, and I've always said this, my thing with golf, and the thing I constantly have to remind myself when I go out there and play, because I do not play often enough to expect to be better than I am. And I know the amount of time, effort, reps, and work it took to be a slightly above average football player relative to the spectrum of people that are going to play at a high level. And I have put nowhere near that amount of work into golf. To expect any other result would fly in the face of everything I know about competitive sports. So I would say probably 30% might be able to get it in play.
So that'd be about 3 people. So let me ask you this. If you were on that first tee, and your ball is a slice, and you can play it pretty well at times, and sometimes it goes straight, would you line up and play a slice, which basically would mean you were aiming at people? Would you play your slice, or would you try and play it straight down the middle?
I would set up my shot with the lowest probability of killing someone. Because if we're inputting an actual gallery, and you mentioned it, it's early, LA Country Club hasn't filled up yet, so I doubt there's a ton of people around those spots. But if I'm hitting with a gallery, no, the only goal is to not kill someone. I don't care about putting it in play. I don't care about where it lands, what the hole is going to look like. I just don't want to plant my ball with a logo inside someone's temple. That's my only goal. Because, Dad, you've played a bunch of these pro-ams. You've hit in places that could, in theory, have this. Have you had to hit around a gallery before?
Yeah. I played in the Houston Open a couple of times, and one time I played with Gary Woodland, and watching pros hit, you're playing with the pros on it's their golf shot sounds like a cannon shot. But yes, the first hole of that has people lined up on it. They announce your name and everything, and scared to death. And luckily I put it in play. I'm not going to say I put it straight down the middle, but I didn't hit anybody. It's nerve-wracking when there is people there. Now that's a real event. Like when I would play Monday after the Masters, there's a lot of people there, but that's a charity event. We're hammered when we're playing, and it is what it is. If you get hit by a ball, it's your own fault. You're too close to me. I want, because we work for DraftKings, I would like to be part of the DraftKings Sportsbook for one shot. When I go play this Tahoe event in July, I'm going to be nervous as hell. I'm out practicing for it. I just the amount of people that are out there, the amount of stars that are out there, and how nervous I'm going to be. I would like odds on my first tee shot being in the fairway. That's all I want. Not my round, because my round will probably stink. I just want to be in the DK Sportsbook. Mike Golic, first tee shot in the fairway. What are the odds? What am I at? Plus what? Plus 1,000, plus 500, plus 10,000. I'd like to have the odds for that.
All right, you know what? We've spoken that into existence early enough here, so cut that, send it to the sportsbook people, tell them to get on it right now. They've got some time. That's not till July, the American Century Classic, so we've got the time and resources to do this, and we need to give people the opportunity to make money, potentially on either your success or failure. You undersell it. I think the one of the things that like the rest of our family marvels at is that you're a little bit too good at everything naturally, and in these situations, I actually think you're going to be a lot calmer than you give credit for here. We will see. It would be the first time in my life I've seen you rattle in an athletic field, and so we'll see if we can get odds on that for people. But in the meantime, we got a great show for y'all. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating. Check us out on DraftKings YouTube and DraftKingsNetwork.com Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 Eastern. Stephen Schoch, former Virginia pitcher, is going to join us for this show. And Dad, I hope you feel downright terrible about this, because he was a pitcher in the 2021 College World Series. He went viral for an interview clip that we're going to play for you guys that resurfaced this week as the College World Series is getting set to get started in Omaha on Friday. And he comes in, he's doing a great podcast now called The Schoch Factor. He's going out to Omaha to cover it, and he shares some great stories with us. And I get on to record the interview with him. You couldn't make it because you were doing something else. And the first thing he says is, "Oh man, it's such an honor. I used to get up every morning and drive to school, and I'd be listening to Mike and Mike in the background." And I thought, well, this is awkward because I wasn't on that show, and you didn't feel like showing up to make his day. So I hope you're happy with yourself.
So I feel I have to say there, I'm on the board for USA Football, and we had one of our quarterly. Well, listen, I have to explain myself. It's not like, I had to take out the trash, so I decided to do it right at the time of this interview, and I blew the guy off. Okay? I'm on the board, USA Football. We had one of our quarterly calls that day, and it went for like 3 hours, and it went during the time you were taping that interview. So I couldn't make it. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying that it was a legitimate reason to miss this interview, and I feel bad once you told me that the guy listened to Mike and Mike. What was he, 4 when he listened to Mike and Mike? That's what I hear from everybody. Oh, man, I was in grade school listening to you. Now I'm 40 and have 3 kids, you old man. But I feel bad. But it was unavoidable.
You should, and you'll hear the emotion, the quiver in his voice when he describes that feeling and the fact that you're not there. It's a real daddy wasn't there moment. So it's also great. We talk about his experience at the College World Series, incredible fan interactions that are the hallmark of the entire experience for the players and fans alike. And of course, the Jello shots, Dad. As you've seen over the last couple of years, Rocco's across the street does the Jello shot consuming. I guess it's kind of a mix between eating and drinking, gelatinous competition among the fan bases there. We talk a little bit about who we expect to maybe take the crown this year, since Ole Miss has become the standard bearer for that down in Omaha. So overall, really great scene there. We do have some football to talk today, Dad. Apparently that Buffalo Bills situation, not nearly as interesting as we build it, pun intended. Since Stefon Diggs was at mandatory minicamp yesterday and will be there for the remainder of the week. My whole question with this is, what was Sean McDermott doing getting to the microphone and talking about being very concerned? Because now we're not going to be able to ignore this specter looming in the background as we got footage of Diggs yesterday doing fun handshakes with Josh Allen. It seems like something that Sean McDermott could have downplayed and chose not to for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's when he could have taken the Bill Belichick approach. We'll see what happens at practice today. We'll only practice with the guys who are there. And he really felt the need to go down the rabbit hole of how concerned he was and then really explain after that, hey, he showed up on that Tuesday, but I was the one that told him to go home. It's not like he just no-showed. He did more talking than was probably necessary. And we always say that's what the media or the public wants. They'd love to hear explanations. But as I've always said, players and coaches, when they're in these pressers, don't owe you anything to that. They owe their team, their fellow players, or their coaches, or the coaches and the players together. That's it. That's all that needs to be worried about. They don't owe the public or the media anything there. And Sean went into a little much there. And is it all resolved? Listen, either way, he was going to play this year. It was just if there was going to be drama. And this seems to be more off the field stuff than on the field stuff. Because as I mentioned yesterday, he's basically top 2 to 5 in every category, of a wide receiver. But still, you could see a wide receiver still not getting mad if they don't even get the ball more. I get it a lot, but I wanted a lot more. But it seems there was more to this. And Sean, spoke maybe a little too much about this. Let's hope it's in the rearview mirror because this is still a team, that's going to be vying to get out of the AFC as the top contender.
Yeah, when we do division previews, this will be a fun one, and even more now with this little bit of zest sprinkled over the top. But if we're going to have a conversation about words said during minicamp that actually matter, I think it's interesting now to shift gears and look at the running back situation because we've seen more than a few guys come out and speak up on the state of running back contracts being doled out across the National Football League. Dan, I know we've had some version of this running backs matter conversation for a few years now since football's become more of a passing game and analytics have inundated the sport and all these different factors that came to a spot where the position doesn't really seem to have the clout that it used to have here. But it's been interesting this offseason because we've heard a lot more from the guys involved on the situation between Saquon Barkley right now still holding out, not signing his franchise tender as they try and work out a long-term deal, saying that he doesn't want to be a market setter, doesn't want to be the highest paid, but is concerned that he's not going to be paid what he is done for and what he represents to this team. You've got Dalvin Cook, who got released by Minnesota, who's saying he's not going to get pressed. He's going to wait for the right opportunity and the right deal. And on down the list, we've seen David Montgomery not signing for as much as he's gone to the Lions for $18 million over 3 years. Miles Sanders coming off a great 2022 season, only earning about $6.35 million per year in his contract with the Panthers. So, Dad, do you see any sign of this slowing, even in a league right now that we saw last year start running the ball more than we'd seen in a while?
Yeah, I listen, I don't. The market's been kind of set for the running back position. And I guess right along the lines of the big talk was with Lamar Jackson and then the next quarterbacks coming down like Burrow and Herbert. Is somebody going to get a fully guaranteed deal like Deshaun Watson did? Is that going to be the new trend? And the only way that was going to happen, because teams didn't want to pay it, was if a quarterback was willing to sit. To literally just sit out and wait for this. And we're not going to find a quarterback that's willing to do that. Lamar Jackson didn't do it. I don't think Burrow is going to do it. And Herbert said he's reporting even while the negotiations are going around. I don't think he's going to do it. So it's going to take a running back, again, in a different vein here, to say, I'm going to hold out for a bigger deal. Le'Veon Bell, remember when he sat the entire year and that completely derailed his career, right? I mean, he was never the same. Never the same.
It did get him the deal. Now, I don't know how much
right.
I was going to say, he ended up getting that big-time deal with the Jets when he got there and actually played for the Jets. Didn't have the best time, ended up getting released, I think, 4 games or 5 games into his second season in New York, but made a bunch of money there with them. But is emblematic of the problem that's come up for a lot of teams is they've got all these cautionary tales of what's happened, the Ezekiel Elliott contract. Even the Carolina Panthers, when they signed Christian McCaffrey after that, missed a whole bunch of games. They end up dealing him in the middle of the season to 49ers. It feels like so many of those moments stacked up in the back of heads of NFL teams, Dad.
So you look at quarterback, or you look at running back. Saquon Barkley is the one we talk about now. He's had 2 full seasons of his 4 or 5, right? He's missed a lot of time. You have him. You have Josh Jacobs. Remember, the Raiders didn't offer him or didn't give him the 5th-year option, right? Mm-hmm. And he kind of bet on himself and had a monster year. Tony Pollard. So those guys on the franchise tag, and again, for the technicality there, or the technical part of that, they have until July 17th, anybody who's franchise tagged, to get a long-term deal. If after July 17th hits, and that's not done, all they can play for is that franchise tag. Now, when I say all they can play for, that's $10 million guaranteed to them, but they can't sign a long-term deal. So that's kind of the deadline, and we'll see if deadline spurs action, which we see a lot of times. Now, remember, Saquon did turn down a deal that was worth, about $13 million a year, maybe $14 million with incentives, which would have been double, basically what.
And his beef with that was there was no mention of the guarantees in there. He thinks that leak was to try and make him look greedy, which is what we tend to see in a lot of these public negotiations. But yeah, that was, and reportedly that deal's back on the table now. But again, we don't know what the guarantee structure looks like, yada, yada, yada.
So, and again, it's a $10 million guarantee with the tag this year. If a running back got tagged next year, it would be about $12 million. So that's what guys are looking at in these deals. If they got tagged for 2 years, it'd be $22 million guaranteed. They want to be paid more than that. And listen, I want every player to get as much as they possibly can. Unfortunately for the running backs, the market is where the market is, and there is not going to be a team that's going to just go flying over that market. They're not going to be the precedent center for the next group coming through. We had 2 running backs taken in the top 12 this year in Robinson and Gibbs. So that's a few years down the road, but nobody wants to set the next precedent for how much they're going to make. So unfortunately, the running back position has really been devalued, and I get running backs being mad about it. I would be too. I mean, Miles Sanders, you mentioned, had almost 1,300 yards rushing, 11 rushing touchdowns, and is making $6 million a year. I mean, compared to the other positions, that's basically nothing. So I don't know how it's going to change, Mike. And you have Jonathan Taylor, obviously, coming up as well in a bit. I don't know how that's going to change. I think incrementally, I mean, it's a nice jump if the guarantees were more what he wanted and it was more in the 13 mil a year guaranteed range. You'd like the guarantee to be more than what the tag was, for the year. I mean, that's something that I'm sure they want to be pushing for, but it's going to take some work for these running backs, and maybe saying, you know what, I'm withholding, because that's the only leverage really a player has. I'm withholding my services. And then does the team, cave to that? Who blinks first?
Yeah, I mean, Saquon's a guy that I think could really rattle the cage if he was one who decided I'm going to sit down for a portion of the season, because to me, running back conversations always have to do with where you're at as a team. And for this Giants team, you were a predominantly rushing team last year as you've weaned Daniel Jones along into Brian Daboll's system. And I'm sure the thought in year 2 is you want even more of the guy that you just signed to that deal, but it's still a team that needs that bedrock there. Jonathan Taylor, the Colts, the same thing. Dad, you mentioned the draft picks. I think part of it is also injury and then the kind of talent at the position, because usually it's been the Christian McCaffreys of the world, the Ezekiel Elliott's of the world that came in with all that fanfare and lived up to it. It feels like the next guy, because Saquon injury became a part of the conversation too quickly maybe for the Giants to feel comfortable. The next one up seems to be this draft class and the guys at the top, and can a generational talent like Bijan Robinson shoulder the load?
But real quick, to your point about Saquon, he may have the best leverage there. The Giants are one of 2 teams that in the last 3 years have not had a 900-yard receiver. So they are not throwing the ball around the deck, and it's not really been happening with Daniel Jones. So he may have some pretty good leverage there of like, you guys need me.
Exactly, and we'll see if that's able to affect this as we near July 17th.
But as long as you got your 26 guys ready to kick ass or kick butt, you're gonna be all right. Sorry, I sweared. I shouldn't have
No,
sweared.
you're good.
I heard a fan offer free Dippin Dots if I blew it, which the price of Dippin Dots with inflation is just unreal. So for a brief moment, I was like, damn, Dippin Dots sound good. But also, I thought in the back of my head, we win today, we win tomorrow, or tonight. We're going to be here another day. That's more per diem. So that means I can buy my own Dippin Dots and be a winner. I think 3 words every time I'm out there. The first one's a swear word, starts with F. Second word's attack. Third one's win. I don't really get too caught up in all the jibber jabber and all the mean things people might say to me, because it's just, I think I'm a cool guy. My dogs think I'm awesome. My teammates like me. And my friends like me, so I'm going to attack, I'm going to win. Simple.
All right, this one is very exciting. A guy who, if you didn't know before, you just got to know again in a new and exciting way as we get ready for the Men's College World Series to get going. Stephen Schoch here, former University of Virginia pitcher, guy who you can also check out right now, the Shock Factor podcast covering college baseball, as he gets set to head to Omaha for the College World Series. Stephen, how you doing, man? This has been a long time coming.
I've been good. I'm thrilled to be here. I drove every day to baseball practice. I would listen to your dad's show, so this is like an honor. So thank you very much for having me. My answer is I was good. Now I'm great. This is awesome. I'm happy to be here. Don't know why I got reintroduced to the world, but hey, I'm here and they did it. So might as well enjoy it. We're here, laugh along, have some fun.
the it you're referring to, by the way, so if anyone missed it the other day, you were in the College World Series back in 2021, and there was a great in-game interview that went on with you and the broadcast crew where you talked about a number of things, your strategy and approach on the mound, the ever-rising price of Dippin Dots, all these things that made you a fan favorite then, and for some reason, I forget if it was the ACC Network or ESPN, threw it back out there. So first off, let's go to that. What was the day like for you as this was hitting the internet, and some people thought it was new, some people remember the run from 2021. What was your phone action like that day?
It was just so strange because, obviously I tweet a lot about college baseball because it's like my calling. It's what I'm supposed to do with my life, I think. So usually there's typically notifications flow in because I don't know how to turn Twitter notifications off on my phone. So the notifications were still coming in, but I got a lot of texts saying, hey, good luck in Omaha. And I was like, or not text, but direct messages. And I was like, what's going on? I was like, thanks, but I'm just interviewing people. I know how to do that. And by now I think I do appreciate looking out because sometimes I do talk and I ramble and it's not great. So I appreciate the good luck and I hope that comes out, but it's definitely confusing. I think the ACC network put it out first at 6:15 and, I saw someone the first notification I saw for it was so-and-so liked the tweet you're mentioned in. So I clicked it and I saw it was the interview and I was like, oh, wow, someone is deep in the ACC network Twitter going back. And then I looked at the timestamp. I was like, wait a minute. Okay. No context as to me not playing or anything like that, but hey, I'll ride it out. I'll relive the glory days because, I see the video and it just instantly sends me back to all the memories I made along that trip and along the way. And, the first thing I think about even is Brandon Neek for UVA striking out 16 guys the next game in relief. And then I just relive all those big moments. And, I get happy whenever I see it again because it's like a time machine to the past for me.
No, like you said, and I think for so many of us, once you're done playing, that is what you have to lean on. It's the memories, it's the teammates that you talk about there. For people that have never been to Omaha for the College World Series or have never experienced this run and won't as a player, what was that like for you? What is the feeling and the energy around this particular environment in college sports?
There's truly nothing like it in the sense that, a lot of people know baseball takes a long time. The games aren't over. There's no set time limit or time frame. They're working on that, but it's not going to happen. So with Omaha, what makes it special is the fact that the games are so long is there's going to be players from other teams there, coaches from other teams there, just walking around amongst the people. And that's what really stood out to me as a player was just the fan interaction and engagement. It was awesome. First of all, just to see it and be a part of it, but going back as a media member and seeing that it's like that for every player. Like they go out, they have the same experience of like, wow, this is one of the few times in my life where like everywhere I go, people are going to be excited to see me and talk to me. I got to soak it all in because, you know, a lot of people play professional sports, but a lot of college athletes, the NCAA commercials will remind you they go pro in something other than sports, which, you know, side note, trying to get on that commercial. I don't know how to, but I would love to. But like, could you imagine just like Stephen Schoch, Mike Golic, you just people,
people,
professional livers. We don't know, but so like being able to go out and interact in an environment where people truly care and like remember meeting you and being able to have that impact on people, so cool. And so that's my favorite part of the whole Omaha experience, is just how accessible the players are.
Did you have like a favorite member? I know you mentioned a couple of them from there, but is there one thing, especially that fan interaction around town, that stuck out to you?
Oh man, there was one woman in South Carolina who she just heckled me like crazy all game, and then like just really rough stuff. And like I'm a gentleman. I'm nice to pretty much everybody, you know. I'm the type of person you could, like John Mulaney says, you could spill soup in my lap and I'd say thank you. Like that's kind of just how I am. And so after the game, it was the game we beat South Carolina, ironically. After the game, she tossed down a ball and was like, if I get you a pen, will you sign this ball? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she was like, you were just such a good sport and you have some of the best hair. And so I wrote on it. I took the ball. Wild turn of emotions. My emotions are already high because I just, like, our team just won. We're getting another game. And she tosses down the ball and I just write, go F yourself - Stephen Schoch, and toss it back up. And she loved it. Like there's, you know how like with some people you can tell like, okay, this person, like they're weird, but they get it, you know? It was one of those situations. I was like, this is a risk. I could look really mean, but I hope like when, like I was nervous when the ball was traveling back up. I was like, this is a big risk. This is big, but she loved it. So I've never seen a picture of the ball back. I feel like it would be on Twitter at some point if she didn't throw it away, but I feel like it might have gotten tossed. But it was so much fun. Like that memory really stands out, like fan interaction wise, for sure. Just like the banter back and forth, because the healthy banter is one of the best things in sports. Like, don't be the person just screaming curse words and like not adding logical thought to it. Like I was getting called things like making fun of my majors, like things like that, like really getting deep. And it's like someone was like, what are you going to do with that major? I'm like, I don't know. I remember saying, I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, if you have any help, here's the like link to my LinkedIn profile. I would love to connect with you in a professional setting.
Yeah, it's like, who do you know in higher education, and can you hook me up? Trying to go pro in things other than sports, you know?
Wait, so you mentioned higher education there. So you go through all of that. You have the viral moment. Everyone sees you're this great personality. Now you're covering the sport. Was that the turn for you? Was that the moment where you're like, you know what? If I could talk about this, I'd love to try and do it?
Yeah, because, you know, going into college baseball, I went in with 3 goals. My first goal was to, you know, get an education my brain couldn't have gotten me. I could not have gotten into UVA, most likely. You know, I got charisma, but that only gets you so far. And then the next goal was to build a platform where I could just kind of talk about baseball for a living. Now, granted, I thought to do this, I would have to play professionally for a long time and like prove that I'm an entertaining guy. I also didn't think this would actually like come true. Like sometimes you set high goals and like it's just like, you know, it would be really, really cool to hit this goal, but if not, that's okay. And so I just got lucky where that one kind of just fell into place from the support of all the amazing people on the internet that were nice to me.
Now, to get to go back, like you said, full circle and going to Omaha and getting to cover this now for a couple of times here, I do want to ask you about one of the other portions of going to Omaha that's gone viral like you have in recent years, and that's the Jello Shot situation over at Rocco's. Now, have you sampled that since you stopped playing in college? I'm assuming you guys as players aren't going over there and checking out the leaderboard.
Yeah, no, as a player, you don't really get, you don't really get the freedom because, again, while it is awesome that fans recognize you and want to talk to you, sometimes you want to do stuff that, you'd rather not be seen doing. But no, I haven't tried them as a player. I have tried them as a media member. And let me tell you, it's all about getting the number on the board. I don't think the Jello Shot was a good sell. It did not sell itself. So that, I mean it to say it was a warm, goopy mess. But I had fun taking it because I was sporting Stanford baseball. I think I was like their 250th on like one of the last weeks there. They didn't buy a lot of Jello Shots. The Stanford Cardinal did not.
How did you end up with the Stanford crew there buying Jello Shots for them?
So they just had the board, and I saw their number was a little low. So it was in the middle of, I can't remember what game it was. I think it might have been Texas A&M and someone. It was a blowout, though. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to walk over there real quick, see what it's like over there. And so I walked over, and there were just a ton of, like, Arkansas fans and tons of Mississippi fans. And I was like, you know what? Stanford needs some help on this one. Let's throw them a bone. They're without a doubt some of the chillest people I've ever met, and like the whole Stanford team, I just really like them. I'm not entirely sure why, but something about them, just like every time I'm around them, every time I've interacted with them, I've left happier than I was before. So, I mean, like my bar is pretty low in terms of getting my bias in favor. It's just be nice.
Hey, listen, life's about setting expectations in the right spot and considering that environment too, where this place has now become famous for a Jello Shot competition among all these fan bases. That's in its own way something that I think too very unique to baseball, where you've got fan bases that are going to coexist together in an environment like that and not tear each other apart inside.
Yeah, and bar. I think that's one of the separators of college baseball is like the fans don't hate each other as much. Like they still probably hate each other a decent amount, but like they're enough to be civil in public settings, which is always, you got to appreciate that. And I think, just with the way college baseball is and the amount of work that the work and time these guys put in, like the fans know about it and they all respect it. So, when you're trashing another team, it's like, well, I don't really want to talk bad about a guy who I know is working hard behind the scenes. So they kind of ease it back and they don't make it like as personal, I would say, as other sports.
No, and it clearly has worked out very well. It's created, March Madness obviously has a very separate place in college sporting lore, but I feel like for so many people, Omaha is almost like this religious trip where if you're a fan of the sport, if you're a fan of baseball at all, making that trip to the College World Series is something you've got to do in your lifetime. And now we've got everyone's tickets punched to the trip right now. Florida, TCU, Oral Roberts, Wake Forest, Virginia, LSU, Stanford, and Tennessee, all going to get to try and live out what you got to live out those years ago. I know you spend a lot of time covering the sport now, so without going too far into it, from this field, who are you most excited to watch? What's the story that you're tracking heading into the Men's College World Series that you're most excited to see?
So it'll be something that has to line up pretty well, but to see Wake Forest and LSU play each other will be something that will be really remarkable, I think, just with the amount of talent in the game. It's one of those games where every couple of years I like to look back at old rosters, and I'm sure you've done it too, where you're like, holy crap, this team was the best team ever, like watching where they ended up. And so this is definitely like this game in itself, where LSU and Wake Forest square up would be just like first round pick after first round pick squaring off. So that's a really good game to keep an eye out for. The whole any of these games, you're going to see a lot of future big leaguers. So that's always fun. But what I really do enjoy watching in Omaha, and this is going to sound so creepy and so weird, but I don't care. If you don't know that about me by now, hey, nice to meet you. That's my life. But I love watching the players interact with fans. Like I know I've stressed that a lot, and that's something, if you're going in person, to keep an eye out for, a little bonus piece of content. But watching at home, just watch the talent on the mound and at the plate. Like college baseball has more talent than it has ever had historically, just because the MLB draft got cut in half. COVID happened. All these guys got to be old and come back. So the talent pool is just spread out much more. And there's just so much more, a larger quantity of it as well. So any game you tune into, it's going to be a pretty fun one to watch.
Who is your pick to win it all at this point?
I got to pick Virginia.
Attaboy.
If I had no allegiances to anyone, and I felt like I wouldn't hurt anyone's feelings by saying another team, I might say Wake Forest is a very good team as well. But any of these teams, like I could go on and give you 5 reasons why each team could have a chance to win Omaha, but it's just so hard to project. And that's another great thing about college baseball is the unpredictability. I'm so stoked to see Oral Roberts here, because what? How'd they get here? Where are they from? Like, this is awesome. Like, it's been about a 48-year drought for them, I think. Or I won't put a number on it, but it's been a while. Wake Forest hasn't been to Omaha since 1955. So this will be their first time dusting off the old cleats and getting out in the Omaha setting. So there's just so much to look forward to, and my mind races too much to narrow it down to one.
Well, you mentioned the Virginia factor of it. What's it like now for you watching as an alum? I was amazed when I stopped playing how you go through this process, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be better on the back end as a fan. I know, and I've had my chance to impact the game. I've seen how the sausage is made. And then I went back to living and dying with them every weekend like I was a fan as a little kid again. What's it like for you watching, I'm sure, some of your old teammates now going at this?
It's so much fun because, like, rooting for them is different than rooting for anyone else, because at the end of the day, I know deep down that they're great people. And, like, I'm sure there's great people all over the place. I just haven't, spent 30 minutes naked in a locker room with them for me to vouch for them like that. So it's going to be a little bit tougher. But as a fan, it's just so much fun to go back and, go to the games, and, like, people will come up and be like, oh, you should get out there. I'll say the weirdest thing. I got zero desire to do that. Like, I just want to watch. Like, yep. I want to sit back. I don't want to sweat at all. I will if I have a few brews, but that's a whole nother story and a different kind of sweat. So it's just so much fun going out and being, like, involved with the fans. And honestly, I really enjoy talking with the parents. Like, it's so much fun to, like, shine a light on these kids, and to see their parents appreciate it makes me feel good. Because, again, sometimes I feel like a weirdo who just, like, sits in a room and I'm like, hey, really good hit, Kyle. And I feel weird, So, like, seeing them in person and, like, they're normal with me, I'm like, oh, thank God. Sorry if I was weird at any point.
It does give you a newfound appreciation for all of the fans of the sport who have been operating like that their whole lives and think nothing of it, to now finally have to operate in that role a little bit. So rest assured, everybody who sees Stephen in Omaha, he's not a weirdo. He's a good guy. He just loves watching you play baseball. And before we let you go here, and we appreciate all of this, again, guys, check out the Shock Factor podcast. It's awesome. It's going to be a great place to live out the College World Series as it's going forward here. You did go famous in this tweet, and I've never actually asked you, for your conversation about Dippin Dots, where do you actually rank Dippin Dots on the scale and on the varieties of ice cream that are available? Is it your favorite? Was it just the pop of conversation there? Because for anyone that missed it, someone offered you Dippin Dots in exchange for, mock jokingly throwing a game. So how much are you actually down with Dippin Dots?
I mean, I love them. When they're in front of me, I'll get them. But when it comes to ice cream, I really like handspun milkshakes. That's like my go-to. I only recently found out you could do this because I stumbled on a TikTok where you literally just put the ice cream into a cup and just stir it with, like, a fork and add a little bit of milk. Have you ever tried it like that? I didn't know you could do it.
I have not, and now it might be the first thing I do when we get off this interview.
It's like all I think about. Like, you get a glass, you put it in the freezer, maybe wet it and put it in the freezer. That might cool it down faster. I don't know how physics work or any of that. I'm not a scientist. put it in the freezer, let it chill for about 30 minutes, take it out, 2 scoops of ice cream. My scoops are heavy. I'm a heavy guy. Little bit of milk, a little bit of peanut butter, some chocolate syrup, and you just take a fork and just kind of mash it around. Let me tell you, once you get it down, because your hand kind of warms it up as you're spinning. I won't do the motion because, the internet exists, but you get it. Like, one hand's up here spinning and the other's here holding it. And it is the best way to enjoy a milkshake. So I don't know if that's ice cream or Dippin Dots, but I don't know if you can do that with Dippin Dots. I feel like you probably can't, but they're still good. Like, don't get me wrong. It was just kind of what the fan had mentioned.
Man, I tell you what, it might be the ice cream of the future, but what you just described is absolutely the snack of my future here. Former pitcher, current podcaster, and ice cream scientist, Stephen Schoch. Thank you so much, sir. Enjoy Omaha, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. All right, man?
Thank you for having me. Pleasure talking with you.
Do you feel even worse now, Dad, once you heard the ice cream discussion?
I feel awful. Yeah, I really do. I'm sorry. I did have a legitimate excuse, but hear him in the beginning saying it was an honor to be on the show, and I know he sure as hell wasn't talking about you. So, I did feel bad.
Yeah, the cold reality we all have to face, and then later drown in a handspun milkshake. All right, Dad, time to finish this thing off the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to get you going into your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating, and let us know what you want to hear. And I've heard the cries of some of our friends in the podcast audience saying they don't get as much love anymore now that we're on DraftKingsNetwork.com and Samsung TV Plus and all this other stuff. And so I do want to say, leave a review like our friend Z Holter, who's always in there, who says, being a podcast listener, I miss the love we used to get. Having a review read not once but twice was nice to hear. Love the show. Fight the algorithm. Well, make it thrice now, my friend. So be like Z Holter and go out here and support the cause there. Dad, let's get to this. The preview, the first trailer dropped yesterday for the new Netflix series Quarterback that's going to follow around 3 quarterbacks from last season on and off the field from the NFL. They chose Marcus Mariota during his Falcons run, Kirk Cousins in the Minnesota Vikings, and the real get here, Dad, let's call it what it is, doing most of the work as far as intrigue, Patrick Mahomes, the reigning Super Bowl champion and MVP. So I'm fired up for this one, Dad. Mostly my NFL drug of choice is always mic'd up content, and it seems like we're going to get some really good Mahomes stuff.
I always enjoy the kind of off the field stuff. I've always said this, like, about Hall of Fame speeches. We know all the stats of the guys that are giving their Hall of Fame speech. I like the road, that we don't know about. And here, in watching the preview of it, I like the off-field stuff, the stuff with the family, the training, and I joke around a lot about quarterbacks as, they don't get hit in practice. They get to wear red jerseys. That's why they're great golfers. They're never sore. But, man, they get beat up on the field. I get it. Even though they're protected more today than they've ever been, it's still obviously a rough sport. They're getting smoked out there. They got to train. They got to prepare. And you're talking about one guy who was on a path of, being one of the all-time greats. Another guy who's going to go down as one of the greatest business decision quarterbacks of all time, and Kirk Cousins, that unfortunately can't lead his team to the promised land, which I also think can be unfair because there's offense, defense, special teams. And a guy in Marcus Mariota who is, is he hitting journeyman state, of kind of, bopping around a little bit, and can he find a home somewhere for more than a year as he tries to continue in his career. So I do like the 3 different kind of levels here we have of quarterback, but give me a lot of the off-field stuff, quite honestly. And I'm with you on the mic'd up stuff. You always love to hear some good trash talk on the field.
Yeah, a lot of the mic'd up footage they used from Patrick Mahomes was also footage of that playoff game where he rolled his ankle and Andy Reid was trying to take him out. So behind the scenes of some of those big moments that we saw from last season. Kirk Cousins, I don't know what weird propaganda book he was reading as child about why there's so many rules protecting the quarterback. You're not slick, NFL, trying to indoctrinate the youth into believing that these guys can't get touched up out there. We see what you're doing, and in this case, we're probably going to like like that. Marcus Mariota, seeing him in this here, Dad, just makes me wish and remember that Marcus Mariota had been drafted into the NFL of now. Like, what he was as a college quarterback was so mismanaged in Tennessee when he got there in that exotic smash mouth BS they were trying to run with Mike Mularkey. And if he had come into this league now that's embracing college concepts more, what could have been for a guy that was so much fun to watch at Oregon?
Yeah, it's tough because you're trying to get a second or third act out of him, but the die has been cast on him. So he'd really have to have kind of a Geno Smith breakout year, right? First off, he'd have to be starting somewhere, and he was for a bit in Atlanta before Ritter took over. He'd have to be starting somewhere, like kind of Geno Smith, like we never expected that last year out of him. That's kind of the situation Mariota would have to be in to kind of resurrect where he was picked in this league.
It's true. So we'll see what that could potentially look like for him, what that's going to look like with those guys as that gets set to kick off here coming up later in the month. Dad, let's get to that big-time auction sale. We always love good sports money coming out. On the 25th anniversary of Michael Jordan's game-winning shot in Game 6 of the 98 Finals, the sneakers he wore earlier in the infamous flu game sold for $1.38 million. Now, Dad, does it take any heat off of it after the last dance that we found out this is actually the food poisoning game?
Yeah. As they say, the flu game sounds much better than the food poisoning game. But how about the backstory to... Yeah, exactly. So how about this? So after the game, he signed those shoes and he gave him to the Utah Jazz ball boy, Preston Truman, who had gotten, Jordan liked the kid because he brought him applesauce before the games. So not thinking what these shoes were going to be, he signed them and gave them to this ball boy. The ball boy hung on to them for 15 years before co-signing them to Gray Flannel Auctions in 2013, where they sold for $104,000. So this guy sold them, or made him part of an auction, sold them for $104,000. 10 years later, on the 25th anniversary, they sold for $1.38 million. You got to wonder if this ball boy is just kicking himself for not hanging on to him for another 10 years. It was made over 1,200% more 10 years later on the 25th anniversary. Just incredible. Still not the highest pair of worn shoes that have gone. That still belongs to Jordan's that he wore in the second half of Game 2 of the 1998 Last Dance NBA Finals, which sold for $2.238 million. So Jordan has the top two selling worn game shoes. But to me, the story is the ball boy. Held on to him for 15 years, sold him for $104,000, 10 more years. He'd have got $1.38 million, or a percentage of that, obviously, but still a huge amount difference.
I need one of those disingenuous, like, bot blue checkmark accounts that do athlete financial threads to talk about how the ball boy actually took his $100,000 and invested it properly, and through the glory of compound interest is now a billionaire who owns several fast food chains. So we'll wait and see the 30 for 30 that kid if it pops up. Dad, let's get to the third. This is art now becoming life. If anyone's seen Ted Lasso, infamous season 2 storyline, Jamie Tart leaves Manchester City to go on Lust. I believe it's Lust Island, or for the lust of the game, a reality dating show in that series. We've got that in real life as Irish footballer leaving Shelbourne Football Club to go and be a part of Love Island. His name is Scott van-der-Sluis, who was a former Welsh soccer player, announced to the team that he would be leaving. He is a 22-year-old that's going on a reality dating series. Dad, Love Island is one of the shows I haven't gotten into as much yet. It's got a very passionate and dedicated fan base. We need more American sports figures leaving for reality dating shows. This is electric content.
So Shelbourne boss of van-der-Sluis, Damian Duff, his quote was, "I was shocked and saddened that Scott chose a villa in Mallorca full of beautiful single women over myself, the staff, and the players." Obviously, he's saying that tongue in cheek. So, yeah, what a move. I'm going to put my professional career on hold to go hang out on Love Island. We've always said this about you, Mike, in Connecticut, you were going to be the Bachelor in the traveling Bachelor show. You were going to be the Bachelor, but it was during COVID and it got canceled. What about the real Bachelor show? Would you leave all your jobs of calling college games, DraftKings, the jobs you would have in the media when you were at ESPN, whatever? Would you have left that all to go shoot a season of The Bachelor?
No, but I should have done it when I was playing football, because I'd imagine this guy is probably not the best prospect when it comes to his career touching soccer. And so he made the executive decision that there's more money to be had here. I should have seen the writing on the wall when I got cut from CFL training camp, that I probably would have been better served trying to go make some of this reality TV money here. So now I think we're good. This is a pretty good, stable gig. And I don't think I have the chops as a 30-some-odd-year-old to try and go beef it out in a house full of all these hot young people trying to find love. But we wish him well in trying to recreate a Ted Lasso storyline. We wish you well after listening to this show. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Boom. Money in the bank.